afternoon, everyone. This is Barbara Three Crow live with Turtle Talk. Today is December 28th, 2015, and I'm speaking to you from Turtle Island, where the great river, the Mahicanituck, flows both ways. Thank you for tuning in, and thank you, Tracy, for getting me on here today. Today I'm going to continue reading about the holy man, Black Elk, and the vision given to him. But first I want to share with you what came through on December 24th, Christmas Eve. And I titled this Temptation. In the Garden of Eden. Paradise. The whole of this earth is the paradise spoken about in the Bible. It was not in some remote mysterious place that the greatest tragedy for humanity unfolded and where the veil of deception was drawn, the biggest sham established. A thunderbolt like an arrow shot across the cosmos, reverberating throughout time. The great lie. You have to ask yourself, why would the Father, God, deliberately put temptation in front of Eve? His creation, after all. Why? If you know the truth, you will know that Eve, our sister, held the knowledge within her. The wisdom was given her by the great sacred Mother Creator, she who is the Mother who gives life, and that Eve herself was a daughter of the Great Spirit Mother Creator. Eve would surely be tempted to follow the guidance of the serpent that came to her in the garden because Eve remembered. She remembered that the mother of all creation often took the form of whatever she dreamed herself to be, and that which would signify her presence to those who held the wisdom and the knowledge, to those who had never forgotten her. The ancient people tell us that the mother was the creator, that she took many forms, that she dreamed herself into being, and often appeared as the great serpent, or the great black winged one, or the woman at the bottom of the sea who sat upon a great black stone, and the great mother turtle. She was the wind, the lightning, and she was the song of the cosmos. She was and is many things. She was the great serpent that spoke to Eve, guiding her to the fruit of the tree of life. The tree of life surely held the fruit of all knowledge. Its foundation is knowledge. Its branches are the wisdom we find throughout our life's journey. The sacred tree of life was created to hold the knowledge of the way humans were to live and how they were to uphold the sacred hoop and all creation. The knowledge the great serpent mother spoke of was meant to be known by all the children of the earth, beginning with Eve. So yes, Eve listened to the great serpent because she remembered the long ago knowledge spoken in the circles of the ancient ones, the grandmothers, the grandfathers, who had revered the great sacred mother, who took the form of whatever she dreamed herself to be. The great serpent spreads across the cosmos and carries the children of the earth, whose time it is to journey home. She is today known as the Milky Way, and the way back home. This is the secret and the lie of how Eve, the daughter of the Great Spirit, was chosen instead to carry the sorrow that all women from then to now would themselves carry. The lie that says Eve had sinned because she listened to the serpent, the devil, and had been tempted to eat of the fruit of the sacred tree of life. Yes, Eve consumed the fruit of wisdom and knowledge that was rightfully hers. It was man who had determined the apple to be the temptation for Eve, replacing the wisdom and knowledge of the tree of life that was the gift to all humanity that had been given by the great sacred mother for all the children of the earth to receive. Now I will continue with the vision given the holy man Black Elk. I left off last week with the visit to Black Elk in 1931 by the author of Black Elk Speaks, John Neihart. And when Black Elk had filled the Chanupawakan, the sacred pipe, to pray before he would begin his account of the vision given him when he was 9 years old. And now Black Elk says to John Neihart as they sat there, "Now I light the pipe, and after I have offered it to the powers that are one power, and sent forth a voice to them, we shall smoke together. And now offering the mouthpiece first of all to the one above, I send a voice. Hey, 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 hey. Grandfather, Great Spirit, you have been always, and before you no one has been. There is no other one to pray to but you. You yourself, everything that you see, everything has been made by you. The star nations all over the universe, you have finished. The 4 quarters of the earth, you have finished. The day, and in that day, everything you have finished. Great Spirit, lean close to the earth that you may hear the voice I send." And he goes on to pray to all the 4 quarters, Tatuye, Topik, and Lena, which means all the 4 quarters and all of the beings. And he speaks to you, and you, Mother Earth, the only Mother. You who have shown mercy to your children, hear me. 4 quarters of the world, I am a relative. Give me the strength to walk the soft earth, a relative to all that is. Give me the eyes to see and the strength to understand, that I may be like you. With your power only can I face the winds. Great Spirit, my grandfather, all over the earth, the faces of living things are all alike. With tenderness have these come up out of the ground. Look upon these faces of children, without number, and with children in their arms, that they may face the winds and walk the good road to the day of quiet. This is my prayer, hear me. The voice I have sent is weak, yet with earnestness I have sent it, hear me. It is finished. Hechituhalo. Now, my friend, Black Elk says to John Neihart, let us smoke together so that there may be only good between us. I am a Lakota of the Oglala band. My father's name was Black Elk, and his father before him bore the name, and the father of his father, so that I am the 4th to bear it. He was a medicine man, and so were several of his brothers. Also he and the great Crazy Horse's father were cousins, having the same grandfather. My mother's name was White Cow Seas, and her father was called Refuse to Go, and her mother Plenty Eagle Feathers. I can remember my mother's mother and her father. My father's father was killed by the Pawnee when I was too little to know, and his mother, Red Eagle Woman, died soon after. I was born in the moon of the popping trees, which is December, on the little Powder River in the winter when the 4 Crows were killed in 1863, and I was 3 years old when my father's right leg was broken in the Battle of the 100 Slain. From that wound he limped until the day he died, which was about the time when Bigfoot's band was butchered on Wounded Knee in 1890. He is buried here in these hills. I can remember that winter of the 100 Slain as a man may remember some bad dream he dreamed when he was little. But I cannot tell just how much I heard when I was bigger and how much I understood when I was little. It is like some fearful thing in a fog, for it was a time when everything seemed troubled and afraid. I had never seen a Wasichu, and the word Wasichu means white people. And Black Elk says that he had never seen a Wasichu then, and did not know what one looked like, but everyone was saying that the Wasichus were coming, and that they were going to take our country and rub us all out, and that we should all have to die fighting. It was the Wasichus who got rubbed out in that battle, and all the people were talking about it for a long while. But 100 Wasichus was not much if there were others, and others without number where those came from. I remember once that I asked my grandfather about this. I said, "When the scouts come back from seeing the prairie full of bison somewhere, the people say the Wasichus are coming. And when strange men are coming to kill us all, they say the Wasichus are coming. What does it mean?" And he said that they are many. When I was older, I learned what the fighting was about that winter and the next summer. Up on the Madison Fork, the Wasichus had found much of the yellow metal that they worship and that makes them crazy, and they wanted to have a road up through our country to the place where the yellow metal was. But my people did not want that road. It would scare the bison and make them go away, and also it would let the other Wasichus come in like a river. They told us that they wanted only to use a little land, as much as a wagon would take between the wheels, but our people knew better. And when you look about you now, you can see what it is that they wanted. Once we were happy in our own country, and we were seldom hungry, for then the 2-leggeds and the 4-leggeds lived together like relatives, and there was plenty for them and for us. But the Wasichus came, and they have made little islands for us, and other little islands for the 4-leggeds, and always these islands are becoming smaller, for around them surges the gnawing flood of the Wasichu, and it is dirty with lies and greed. A long time ago my father told me what his father told him, that there was once a Lakota holy man called Drinkswater, who dreamed what was to be, and this was long before the coming of the Wasichus. He dreamed that the 4-leggeds were going back to the earth, and that a strange race had woven a spider's web all around the Lakotas. And he said, "When this happens, you shall live in square gray houses in a barren land. And beside those square gray houses you shall starve." They say he went back to Mother Earth soon after he saw this vision, and that it was sorrow that killed him. You can look about you now and see that he meant these dirt-roofed houses we are living in, and that all the rest was true. Sometimes dreams are wiser than waking. And so when the soldiers came and built themselves a town of logs there on the piney fork of the Powder River, my people knew they meant to have their road and take our country and maybe kill us all when they were strong enough. Crazy Horse was only about 19 years old then, and Red Cloud was still our great chief. In the moon of the changing season, October, he called together all the scattered bands of the Lakota for a big council on the Powder River. And when we went on the warpath against the soldiers, a horseback could ride through our villages from sunrise until the day was above his head. So far did our camp stretch along the valley of the river, for many of our friends, the Blue Clouds and the Shalea, had come to help us fight. And it was about when the bitten moon was delayed, which is the last quarter, in the time of the popping trees, when the 100 were rubbed out. My friend, Fire Thunder here, who is older than I, was in that fight, and he can tell you how it was. Fire Thunder speaks. I was 16 years old when this happened, and after the big council on the Powder River, we had moved over to the Tongue River, where we were camping at the mouth of Pino Creek. There were many of us there. Red Cloud was over all of us, but the chief of our band was Big Road. We started out on horseback just about sunrise, riding up the creek toward the soldiers' town on the Piney, for we were going to attack it. The sun was about halfway up when we stopped at the place where the Wasichus road came down a steep, narrow ridge and crossed the creek. It was a good place to fight, so we sent some men ahead to coax the soldiers out. While they were gone, we divided into 2 parts and hid in the gullies on both sides of the ridge and waited. After a long while, we heard a shot up over the hill, and we knew the soldiers were coming. So we held the noses of our ponies that they might not whinny at the soldiers' horses. Soon we saw our men coming back, and some of them were walking and leading their horses so that the soldiers would think that they were worn out. Then the men we had sent ahead came running down the road between us, and the soldiers on horseback followed, shooting. When they came to the flat at the bottom of the hill, the fighting began all at once. I had a sorrel horse, and just as I was going to get on him, the soldiers turned around and began to fight their way back up the hill. I had a 6-shooter that I had traded for, and also a bow and arrows. When the soldiers started back, I held my sorrel with one hand and began killing them with the 6-shooter, for they came close to me. There were many bullets, but there were more arrows, so many that it was like a cloud of grasshoppers all above and around the soldiers. And our people, shooting across, hit each other. The soldiers were falling all the while they were fighting back up the hill, and their horses got loose. Many of our people chased the horses, but I was not after horses. I was after Wasichus. When the soldiers got on top, there were not many of them left, and they had no place to hide. They were fighting hard. We were told to crawl up on them, and we did. When we were close, someone yelled, "Let us go! This is a good day to die. Think of the helpless ones at home." Then we all cried, "Hoka-hey!" and we rushed at them. I was young then, and quick on my feet, and I was one of the first to get in among the soldiers. They got up and they fought very hard until not one of them was alive. They had a dog with them, and he started back up the road for the soldiers' town, howling as he ran. He was the only one left. I did not shoot at him because he looked too sweet, but many did shoot, and he died, full of arrows. So there was nobody left of the soldiers. Dead men and horses and wounded Indians were scattered all the way up the hill. Their blood was frozen, for a storm had come up, and it was very cold and getting colder all the time. We left all the dead lying there, for the ground was solid. We picked up our wounded and started back, but we lost most of them before we reached our camp in the mouth of the Pino. There was a big blizzard that night, and some of the wounded who did not die on the way died after we got home. This was the time when Black Elk's father had his leg broken. And now Black Elk continues. I am quite sure that I remember the time when my father came home with a broken leg that he got from killing so many Wasichus. And it seems that I can remember all about the battle too, but I think I could not. It must be the fear that I remember most. All this time I was not allowed to play very far away from our teepee, and my mother would say, "If you are not good, the Wasichus will get you." We must have broken camp at the mouth of the Pino soon after the battle, for I can remember my father lying on a pony drag with bison robes all around him like a baby, and my mother riding the pony. The snow was deep, and it was very cold, and I remember sitting in another pony drag beside my father and mother, all wrapped up in fur. We were going away from where the soldiers were, and I do not know where we went, but it was west. It was a hungry winter, for the deep snow made it hard to find the elk, and also many of the people went snowblind. We wandered a long time, and some of the bands got lost from each other. Then at last we were camping in the woods beside a creek somewhere, and the hunters came back with meat. I think it was this same winter when a medicine man by the name of Creeping went around among the people curing the snowblind. He would put snow upon their eyes, and after he had sung a certain sacred song that he had heard in a dream, he would blow on the backs of their heads, and they would see again. It was about the dragonfly that he sang, for that was where he got his power. When it was summer again, we were camping on the Rosebud, and I did not feel so much afraid, because the Wasichu seemed farther away, and there was peace in that valley, and there was plenty of meat. But all the boys from 5 or 6 years up were playing war. The little boys would gather together from the different bands of the tribe and fight each other with mud balls and that they threw with willow sticks. And the big boys played the game called throwing themselves off their horses, which is a battle all but the killing, and sometimes they did get hurt. The horsebacks from the different bands would line up and they'd charge upon each other, yelling, and when the ponies came together on their run, they would rear and flounder and scream in a big dust, and the riders would seize each other, wrestling upon one side until one side had lost all of its men, for those who fell upon the ground were counted as dead. When I was older, I too often played this game. We were always naked when we played it, just as warriors are when they go into battle, if it is not too cold, because they are swifter without clothes. Once I fell off on my back right in the middle of a bed of prickly pears. It took my mother a long while to pick all of the stickers out of me. I was still too little to play war that summer, but I can remember watching the other boys. And I thought that when we all grew up and we were big together, maybe we could kill all the Wasichus and drive them far away from our country. It was in the moon, when the cherries turned black, August, that all the people were talking about a battle, and our warriors came back from the many wounded. It was the attacking of the wagons time, and it made me afraid again. For we did not win that battle, as we did the other one. And there was much mourning for our dead. Fire Thunder was in that fight too, and he can tell you how it was that day. And Fire Thunder speaks. It was very bad. There is a wide, flat prairie with hills around it, and in the middle of this the Wasichus had put the boxes of their wagons in a circle, so that they could keep their mules there at night. There were not many Wasichus, but they were lying behind the boxes, and they shot faster than they ever shot at us before. We thought it was some new medicine of great power that they had, for they shot so fast that it was like tearing a blanket. Afterwards I learned that it was because they had new guns that they loaded from behind, and this was the first time they used these guns. We came on after sunrise. There were many, many of us, and we meant to ride right over them and rub them out. But our ponies were afraid of the ring of fire the guns of the Wasichus made, and they would not go over. Our women were watching us from the hills, and we could hear them singing and mourning whenever the shooting stopped. We tried hard, but we could not do it, and there were dead warriors and horses piled all around the boxes and scattered over the plain. Then we left our horses in a gulch and charged on foot, but it was like green grass withering in a fire. So we picked up our wounded and went away. I do not know how many of our people were killed, but there were very many. It was bad. And Black Elk continues. I do not remember where we camped that winter, but it must have been a time of peace and of plenty to eat. And Standing Bear speaks. I am 4 years older than Black Elk, and he and I have been good friends since boyhood. I know that it was on the Powder River that we camped, where there were many cottonwood trees. Ponies like to eat the bark of these trees, and it is good for them. That was the winter when High Shirt's mother was killed by a big tree that fell on her teepee. It was a very windy night, and there were noises that woke me, and then I heard that an old woman had been killed. It was High Spirit's mother. And Black Elk continues. I was 4 years old then, and I think it must have been the next summer that I first heard the voices. It was a happy summer, and nothing was afraid, because in the moon, when the ponies shed, word came from the Wasichus that there would be peace, and that they would not use the road anymore, and that all the soldiers would go away. The soldiers did go away, and their towns were torn down, and in the moon of falling leaves, November, they made a treaty with Red Cloud that said our country would be ours as long as grass should grow and water flow. You can see that it is not the grass and the water that have forgotten. Maybe it was not this summer when I first heard the voices, but I think it was, because I know it was before I played with bows and arrows or rode a horse, and I was out playing alone when I heard them. It was like somebody calling me, and I thought it was my mother, but there was nobody there. This happened more than once, and always made me afraid, so that I ran home. It was when I was 5 years old that my grandfather made me a bow and some arrows. The grass was young, and I was on horseback. A thunderstorm was coming from where the sun goes down, and just as I was riding into the woods along a creek, there was a kingbird sitting on a limb. This was not a dream. It happened. And I was going to shoot at the kingbird with the bow my grandfather made when the bird spoke to me and said, "The clouds all over are one-sided." Perhaps it meant that all the clouds were looking at me. And then it said, "Listen, a voice is calling you." Then I looked up at the clouds, and 2 men were coming, head first like arrows slanting down, and as they came they sang a sacred song, and the thunder was like drumming. I will sing it for you. The song and the drumming were like this: "Behold, a sacred voice is calling you. All over the sky a sacred voice is calling." I sat there gazing at them, and they were coming from the place where the giant lives, which is the north. But when they were very close to me, they wheeled about toward where the sun goes down, and suddenly they were geese. Then they were gone, and the rain came, and a big wind, and a roaring. I did not tell this vision to anyone. I liked to think about it, but I was afraid to tell it. This is the great vision that Black Elk was given. What happened after that until the summer I was 9 years old is not a story. There were winters and summers, and they were good, for the Wasichus had made their iron road along the Platte River and traveled there. This had cut the bison herd in two, but those that stayed in our country were with us were more than could be counted, and we wandered without trouble in our land. Now and then the voices would come back when I was out alone, like someone calling me, but what they wanted me to do I did not know. This did not happen very often, and when it did not happen, I forgot about it, for I was growing taller and was riding horses now and could shoot prairie chickens and rabbits with my bow. The boys of my people began very young to learn the ways of men, and no one taught us. We just learned by doing what we saw, and we were warriors at a time when boys now are like girls. It was the summer when I was 9 years old. Our people were moving slowly towards the Rocky Mountains. We camped one evening in a valley beside a little creek, just before it ran into the greasy grass. And there was a man by the name of Manhip, who liked me and asked me to eat with him in his teepee. While I was eating, a voice came and said, "It is time, now they are calling you." The voice was so loud and clear that I believed it, and I thought I would just go where it wanted me to go. So I got right up and started. As I came out of the teepee, both my thighs began to hurt, and suddenly it was like waking from a dream, and there wasn't any voice. So I went back into the teepee, but I didn't want to eat. Manhip looked at me in a strange way, and he asked me what was wrong. I told him that my legs were hurting. The next morning the camp moved again, and I was riding with some boys. We stopped to get a drink from a creek, and when I got off my horse, my legs crumpled under me and I could not walk. So the boys helped me up and put me on my horse, and when we camped again that evening I was sick. The next day the camp moved on to where the different bands of our people were coming together, and I rode in a pony drag, for I was very sick. Both my legs and both my arms were swollen badly, and my face was all puffed up. When we had camped again, I was lying in our teepee, and my mother and father were sitting beside me. I could see out through the opening, and there 2 men were coming from the clouds, head first, like arrows slanting down, and I knew they were the same that I had seen before. Each one carried a long spear, and from the points of these a jagged lightning flashed. They came clear down to the ground this time, and stood a little way off. They looked at me and said, "Hurry, come, your grandfathers are calling you." Then they turned and left the ground like arrows slanting upward from the bow. When I got up to follow, my legs did not hurt me anymore, and I was very light. I went outside the teepee, and yonder where the men were flaming spears were going, a little cloud was coming very fast. It came and stooped and took me and turned back to where it came from, flying fast. And when I looked down, I could see my mother and father, and I felt sorry to be leaving them. Then there was nothing but the air and the swiftness of the little cloud that bore me, and these 2 men leading to where white clouds were piled like mountains on a wide blue plain, and in them thunder beings lived and leaped out and flashed everywhere. Now suddenly there was nothing but a world of cloud, and we 3 were there alone in the middle of a great white plain with snowy hills and mountains staring at us. It was very still, but there were whispers. Then the 2 men spoke together, and they said, "Behold him, the being with 4 legs." I looked and saw a bay horse standing there, and he began to speak to me. "Behold me," he said. "My life history you shall see." Then he wheeled about to where the sun goes down and said, "Behold them, their history you shall know." I looked, and there were 12 black horses yonder, all standing abreast, with necklaces of bison hooves. They were beautiful, but I was frightened, because their manes were lightning, and there was thunder in their nostrils. Then the bay horse wheeled to where the great white giant lives, the north, and said, "Behold, and yonder there were 12 white horses all abreast. Their manes were flowing like a blizzard wind, and from their noses came a roaring, and all about them white geese soared and circled around." Then the bay wheeled round to where the sun shines continually, and bade me look, and there were 12 sorrel horses with necklaces of elk's teeth, standing abreast with eyes that glimmered like the daybreak star, and their manes were like the morning light. Then the bay wheeled once again to look upon the place where you are always facing, the place of the south, and stood 12 buckskins all abreast with horns upon their heads and manes that lived and grew like trees and grasses. And when I had seen all these, the bay horse said to me, "Your grandfathers are having a council. These shall take you, so have courage." Then all the horses went into formation 4 abreast, the blacks, the whites, the sorrels, and the buckskins, and they stood behind the bay, who turned now to the west, and whinnied. And yonder suddenly the sky was terrible with a storm of plunging horses in all colors that shook the world with thunder. Now turning to the north, the bay horse whinnied, and yonder all the sky roared with a mighty wind of running horses in all colors. And when he whinnied to the east, there too the sky was filled with glowing clouds of manes and tails of horses in all colors singing back. And then to the south he called, and it was crowded with many colored happy horses all singing. Then the bay horse spoke to me again and said, "See how your horses all come dancing." I looked, and there were horses, horses everywhere, a whole sky full of horses dancing around me. "Make haste," the bay horse said, and we walked together side by side, while the blacks, the whites, the sorrels, and the buckskins followed us, marching 4 by 4. I looked about me once again, and suddenly the dancing horses without number changed into animals of every kind, into all the fowls, the birds, and these fled back to the 4 quarters of the world where whence the horses came, and they vanished. Then as we walked, there was a heaped up cloud ahead that changed into a teepee, and a rainbow was the open door of it, and through the door I saw 6 old men sitting in a row. The 2 men with the spears now stood beside me, one on either hand, and the horses took their places in their quarters, looking inward 4 by 4. And the oldest of the grandfathers spoke with a kind voice, and he said, "Come right in, and do not fear." And as he spoke, all the horses of the 4 quarters neighed to cheer me. So I went in and stood before the 6. They looked older than men can ever be, old like the hills, old like stars. The oldest spoke again. "Your grandfathers all over the world are having a council, and they have called you here to teach you." His voice was very kind, but I shook all over with fear now, for I knew that these were not old men, but that they were the powers of the world. And the first was the power of the West, and the second was the power of the North, the third of the East, the fourth of the South, the fifth of the sky, and the 6th of the earth. I knew this, and I was afraid, until the first grandfather spoke again. He said, "Behold them yonder where the sun goes down, the thunder beings. You shall see, and have from them my power, and they shall take you to the high and lonely center of the earth, that you may see, even to the place where the sun continually shines. They shall take you there to understand." And as he spoke of understanding, I looked up and saw the rainbow leap with flames of many colors over me. Now there was a wooden cup in his hand, It was full of water, and in the water was the sky. "Take this," he said. "It is the power to make you live, and it is yours." Now he had a bow in his hand. "Take this," he said. "It is the power to destroy, and it is yours." Then he pointed to himself and said, "To look close at him, who is your spirit now, for you are his body, and his name is Eagle Wing Stretches." In saying this, he got up very tall and started running toward me where the sun goes down, and suddenly he was a black horse that stopped and turned and looked at me, and the horse was very poor and sick. His ribs stood out. Then the second grandfather, he of the north, he rose with a herb of power in his hands and said, "Take this and hurry." I took it and I held it toward the black horse, and he fattened and was happy, and he came prancing to his place again and was the first grandfather sitting there. The second grandfather of the north spoke again. He said, "Take courage. On earth a nation you shall make live, for yours shall be the power of the white giant's wing, the cleansing wind." Then he got up very tall and started running toward the north, and when he turned toward me, it was a white goose, wheeling, flying. I looked about me now, and the horses in the west were thunders, and the horses of the north were geese. And the second grandfather sang 2 songs that were like this. "They are appearing, may you behold. They are appearing, may you behold. The Thunder Nation is appearing, behold. They are appearing, may you behold. They are appearing, may you behold. The white geese nation is appearing." And now it was the third grandfather who spoke to me, and he was where the sun shines continually, and said, "Take courage, younger brother, for across the earth they shall take you." Then he pointed to where the daybreak star was shining, and beneath the star 2 men were flying. "From them you shall have power, from them who have awakened all the beings of the earth with roots and legs and wings." And as he said this, he held in his hand a peace pipe, which had a spotted eagle outstretched upon the stem, and this eagle seemed alive, for it was poised there, fluttering, and its eyes were looking at me. "With this pipe," the grandfather said, "you shall walk upon the earth, and whatever sickens there you shall make well." Then he pointed to a man who was bright red all over, the color of good and of plenty. And as he pointed, the red man lay down and rolled and changed into a bison that got up and galloped toward the sorrel horses to the east, and they too turned to bison, fat and many. And now the fourth grandfather spoke. He of the place where you are always facing, the south, and where the power comes to grow. "Younger brother," he said, "with the powers of the 4 quarters you shall walk, a relative. Behold, the living center of a nation I shall give to you, and with it many you shall save." And I saw that he was holding in his hand a bright red stick that was alive, and as I looked, it sprouted at the top and sent forth branches, and on the branches many leaves came out and murmured, and in the leaves the birds began to sing. And then For just a little while I thought I saw beneath it in the shade the circled villages of people and every living thing with roots or legs or wings, and all were happy. It shall stand in the center of the nation's circle, said the grandfather, a cane to walk with and a people's heart, and by your powers you shall make it blossom. Then, when he had been still a little while to hear the birds sing, he spoke again to me. Behold the earth. So I looked down, and saw it lying yonder like a hoop of people, and in the center bloomed the holy stick that was a tree, and where it stood there crossed two roads, a red one and a black. From where the giant lives, the north, to where you always face, the south, the red road goes, the road of good, the grandfather said, and on it shall your nation walk. The black road goes from where the thunder beings live, the west, to where the sun continually shines, the east, a fearful road, a road of troubles and of war. On this also you shall walk, and from it you shall have the power to destroy a people's foe. In for a sense you shall walk the earth with power. I think he meant that I should see 4 generations, counting me, and now I am seeing the 3rd. Then he rose very tall and started running toward the south, and he became an elk. And as he stood among the buckskins yonder, they too became elks. And now the 5th grandfather spoke, the oldest of them all, the spirit of the sky. My boy, he said, I have sent for you, and you have come. My power you shall see. He stretched his arms and turned into a spotted eagle. Behold, he said, all the wings of the air shall come to you, and they and the winds and the stars shall be like relatives. You shall go across the earth with my power. Then the eagle soared above my head and fluttered there, and suddenly the sky was full of friendly wings all coming towards me. Now I knew the 6th grandfather was about to speak, he who was the spirit of the earth, and I saw that he was very old, but more as men are old. His hair was long and white, his face was all in wrinkles, and his eyes were deep and very dim. I stared, for it seemed I knew him somehow, and as I stared he slowly changed. For he was growing backwards into youth, and when he had become a boy, I knew that he was myself, with all the years that would be mine at last. When he was old again, he said, My boy, have courage, for my power shall be yours, and you shall need it, for your nation on the earth will have great troubles. And he rose and he tottered out through the rainbow door, and as I followed, I was riding on the bay horse, who had talked to me at first and led me to that place. Then the bay horse stopped and faced the black horses of the west, and a voice said, They have given you the cup of water to make live the greening day, and also the bow and arrow to destroy. And the 12 black horses came, and they stood behind me 4 abreast. And the bay faced the sorrels of the east, and I saw that they had morning stars upon their foreheads, and they were very bright. And the voice said, They have given you the sacred pipe, and the power that is peace, and the good red day. And the 12 sorrels stood behind me 4 abreast. My horse now faced the buckskins of the south, and a voice said, They have given you the sacred stick and your nation's hoop and the yellow day, and in the center of the hoop shall set the stick and make it grow into a shielding tree and bloom. And the 12 buckskins came, and they stood behind me 4 abreast. Then I knew that there were riders on all the horses behind me, and a voice said, "Now you shall walk the black road with these, and as you walk, all the nations that have roots or legs or wings shall fear you." So I started riding toward the east down the fearful road, and behind me came the horsebacks 4 abreast, the blacks, the whites, the sorrels, and the buckskins, and far away above the fearful road the daybreak star was rising, very dim. I looked below me where the earth was silent in a sick green light, and I saw the hills look up afraid, and the grasses on the hills, and all the animals, and everywhere about me were the cries of frightened birds and sounds of fleeing wings. I was the chief of all the heavens riding there, and when I looked behind me, all the 12 black horses reared, and they plunged and thundered, and their manes and tails were whirling hail, and their nostrils were snorting lightning. And when I looked below again, I saw the slant hail falling and the long sharp rain, and where we passed, the trees bowed low, and all the hills were dim. Now the earth was bright again as we rode. I could see the hills and the valleys and the creeks of rivers passing under. We came above a place where 3 streams made a big one, a source of mighty waters. And something terrible was there. Flames were rising from the waters, and in the flames a blue man lived. The dust was floating all about him in the air. The grass was short and withered. The trees were wilting. 2-legged and 4-legged beings lay there, thin and panting, and wingeds were too weak to fly. Then the black horse rider shouted, "Hoka-hey!" And they charged down upon the blue man, but were driven back. And the white troop shouted, charged, and they were beaten, and then the red, and then the yellow. And when each had failed, they all cried together, "Eagle Wing stretches, hurry!" And all the world was filled with voices of all kinds that cheered me, and so I charged. I had the cup of water in one hand, and the other was the bow that turned into a spear as the bay and I swooped down, and the spear's head was sharp lightning, and it stabbed the blue man's heart. And as it struck, I could hear the thunder rolling and many voices that cried, "Oh-hee!" meaning I had killed. The flames died. The trees and grasses were no longer withered and murmured happily together. And every living being cried in gladness with whatever voice it had. And then the 4 troops of horsemen charged down and struck the dead body of the blue man, counting coup. And suddenly it was only a harmless turtle. You see, I had been riding with the storm clouds and had come to earth as rain, and it was drought that I had killed, with the power that the 6 grandfathers gave to me. So we were riding on the earth now, down along the river, flowing full from the source of waters, and soon I saw ahead the circled village of a people in the valley, and a voice said, "Behold a nation, it is yours, make haste, Eagle Wing stretches." And I entered the village riding with the 4 horse troops behind me, the blacks, the whites, the sorrels, and the buckskins, and the place was filled with moaning and with mourning for the dead. The wind was blowing from the south like a fever, And when I looked around, I saw that in nearly every teepee, the women and the children and the men lay dying. So I rode around the circle of the village, looking in upon the sick and the dead. I felt like crying. But when I looked behind me, all the women and the children and the men were getting up and coming forth with happy faces. And a voice said, "Behold, they have given you the center of the nation's hoop to make it live." So I rode to the center of the village, with the horse troops in their quarters round about me, and there the people gathered. And the voice said, "Give them now the flowering stick, that they may flourish, and the sacred pipe, that they may know the power that is peace, and the wing of the white giant, that they may have endurance, and face all winds with courage." So I took the bright red stick, and at the center of the nation's hoop I thrust it into the earth. And as it touched the earth, it leaped mightily in my hand, and became a wagachun, the rustling tree, very tall and full of leafy branches and all birds singing. And beneath it all the animals were mingling with the people like relatives and making happy cries. The women raised their tremolo of joy, and the men shouted together, "Here we shall raise our children, and be as little chickens under the mother Shio's wings." Then I heard the white wind blowing gently through the trees, and singing there, and from the east the sacred pipe came flying on its eagle wings, and stopped before me, there beneath the tree, spreading deep peace around it. Then the daybreak star was rising, and a voice said, "It shall be a relative to them, and who shall ever see it shall see much. For there comes wisdom, and those who do not see it shall be dark." And all the people raised their faces to the east, and there the star's light fell upon them. And all the dogs barked loudly, and the horses whinnied. Then, when the many little voices ceased, the great voice said, "Behold the circle of the nation's hoop, for it is holy, it is endless, and thus all powers shall be one power in the people without end. Now they shall break camp and go forth upon the red road, and your grandfather shall walk with them." So the people broke camp and took the good road with the white wing on their faces, and the order of their going was like this. First the black horse riders with the cup of water, and then the white horse riders with the white wing and the sacred herb, and then the sorrel riders with the holy pipe, and the buckskins then with the flowering stick. And after these the little children, and the youths and the maidens followed in a band. Second came the tribe's 4 chieftains, and their band was all young men and women. Third, the nation's 4 advisers, leading men and women neither young nor old. Fourth, the old men hobbling with their canes and looking to the earth. And fifth, old women hobbling with their canes and looking to the earth. And sixth, myself all alone upon the bay with the bow and arrows that the first grandfather had given me. But I was not the last, for when I looked behind me there were ghosts of people like a trailing fog as far as I could see, grandfathers of grandfathers and grandmothers of grandmothers without number. And over these a great voice, the voice that was the South, lived, and I could feel it silent. And as we went, the voice behind me said, "Behold a good nation walking in a sacred manner in a good land." Then I looked up and saw that there were 4 ascents ahead, and these were generations I should know. Now we were on the first ascent, and all the land was green. And as the long line climbed, all the old men and women raised their hands, palms forward, to the far sky yonder, and they began to croon a song together, and the sky ahead was filled with clouds of babies' faces. When we came to the end of the first ascent, we camped in the sacred circle as before, and in the center stood the holy tree, and still the land about us was all green. Then we started on the second ascent, marching as before, and still the land was green, but it was getting steeper. And as I looked ahead, the people changed into elks and bison and all 4-footed beings, and even into fowls, all walking and flying in a sacred manner on the good red road together. And I myself was a spotted eagle soaring over them. But just before we stopped to camp at the end of that ascent, all the marching animals grew restless and afraid that they were not what they had been, and began sending forth voices of trouble, calling to their chiefs. And when they camped at the end of that ascent, I looked down and saw that leaves were falling from the holy tree. And the voice said, "Behold your nation. Remember what your 6 grandfathers gave you, for thenceforth your people walk in difficulties." The people broke camp again and saw the black road before them towards where the sun goes down. And black clouds were coming, and they did not want to go, but they could not stay. And as they walked the third ascent, all the animals and the winged that were the people ran here and there, for each one seemed to have his own little vision that he followed, and his own rules. And all over the universe I could hear the winds at war, like beasts fighting. And when we reached the summit of the third ascent and camped, the nation's hoop was broken like a ring of smoke that spreads and scatters, and the holy tree seemed dying, and all of its birds were gone. And when I looked ahead, I saw that the 4th ascent would be terrible. That when the people were getting ready to begin the 4th ascent, the voice spoke like someone weeping and said, "Look there upon your nation." And when I looked down, the people were all changed back to human, and they were thin, their faces sharp, for they were starving. Their ponies were only hide and bones, and the holy tree was gone. I looked and I wept. I saw that there stood on the north side of the starving camp a sacred man who was painted red all over his body, and he held a spear as he walked into the center of the people, and there he lay down and he rolled. And when he got up, it was a fat bison standing there. And when the bison stood, a sacred herb sprang up right where the tree had been in the center of the nation's hoop. This herb grew and bore 4 blossoms on a single stem. While I was looking, a blue, a white, a red, and a yellow, and the bright rays of these flashed to the heavens. I knew now what this meant, that the bison were the gift of a good spirit, and were our strength, but that we would lose them. And from the same good spirit we must find another strength. For the people all seemed better when the herb had grown and had bloomed, and the horses raised their tails, and they whinnied and they pranced around. I could see a light breeze going from the north among the people like a ghost, and suddenly the flowering tree was there again, at the center of the nation's hoop, where the four-rayed herb had blossomed. I was still the spotted eagle floating, and I could still see that I was already in the fourth ascent, and the people were camping yonder at the top of the third long rise. It was dark and terrible about me, for all the winds of the world were fighting. It was like rapid gunfire, and like whirling smoke, and like women and children wailing, and like horses screaming all over the world. I could see my people yonder running about, setting the smoke-flap poles and fastening down their teepees against the wind, for the storm cloud was coming on them very fast and black, and there were frightened swallows without numbers fleeing before the cloud. Then a song of power came to me, and I sang it there in the midst of that terrible place where I was, and it went like this: A good nation I will make live, this the nation above has said. They have given me the power to make over. And when I had sung this, a voice said, To the four quarters you shall run for help, and nothing shall be strong before you. Behold him. Now I was on my bay horse again, because the horse is of the earth, and it was there my power would be used. And as I obeyed the voice and I looked, there was a horse all skin and bones yonder in the west, a faded brownish black. And a voice there said, Take this and make him over. And it was the four-rayed herb that I was holding in my hand. So I rode above the poor horse in a circle, and as I did this I could hear the people yonder calling for spirit power. Ahey, ahey, ahey. Then the poor horse neighed and rolled and got up, and he was a big, shiny black stallion with dapples all over him, his mane about him like a cloud. He was the chief of all the horses, and when he snorted it was a flash of lightning, and his eyes were like the sunset star. He dashed to the west, and the west was filled with the dust of hoofs, and the horses without number, shining black, came plunging from that dust. Then he went to the north, and to the east and the south, and the dust clouds answered, giving forth their plunging horses without number, whites, sorrels, buckskins, all fat and shiny, rejoicing. It was beautiful, but also it was terrible. Then they all stopped short and were standing in a great hoop about their black chief at the center, and they were still. And as they stood, 4 young maidens, more beautiful than women of the earth can be, came through the circle, dressed in scarlet, one from each of the 4 quarters, and they stood about the great black stallion in their places. One held the wooden cup of water, and one the white wing, and one the pipe, and one the nation's hoop. All the universe was silent, listening. And then the great black stallion raised his voice and he sang, My horses prancing, they are coming. My horses neighing, they are coming. Prancing, they are coming. All over the universe they come. They will dance. May you behold them. And he sang this 4 times. A horse nation they will dance. May you behold them. Again, he sang it 4 times. His voice was not loud, but it went all over the universe and filled it. There was nothing that did not hear, and it was more beautiful than anything could be. It was so beautiful that nothing anywhere could keep from dancing. The maidens danced, and all the circled horses, the leaves on the trees, the grasses on the hills and in the valleys, the waters in the creeks and in the rivers and the lakes, the 4-legged and the 2-legged, the wingeds of the air, all danced together to the music of the stallion's song. When I looked down upon my people yonder, the cloud passed over, blessing them with friendly rain, and stood in the east with a flaming rainbow over it. Then all the horses went singing back to their places beyond the summit of the 4th ascent, and all things sang along with them as they walked. And a voice said, "All over the universe they have finished a day of happiness." And looking down, I saw that the whole wide circle of the day was beautiful and green, with all fruits growing and all things kind and happy. Then a voice said, "Behold this day, for it is yours to make. Now you shall stand upon the center of the earth to see, for there they are taking you." I was still on my bay horse, and once more I felt the riders of the west, the north, the east, and the south behind me in formation, and we were going east. I looked ahead and I saw the mountains there with rocks and forests, and from the mountains flashed all colors upon the heavens. Then I was standing on the highest mountain of them all. Round about beneath me was the whole hoop of the world. And while I stood there, I saw more than I can tell, and I understood more than I saw. For I was seeing, in a sacred manner, the shapes of all things in the Spirit, and the shape of all shapes as they must live together like one being. And I saw that the sacred hoop of my people was one of many hoops that made one circle, wide as daylight and as starlight, and in the center grew one mighty flowering tree to shelter all the children of one mother and one father. And I saw that it was holy. I stood there, and 2 men were coming from the east, head first like arrows flying, and between them rose the day-break star. They came, and they gave an herb to me, and they said, "With this on earth you shall undertake anything and do it." It was the day-break star herb, the herb of understanding, and they told me to drop it on the earth. I saw it falling far, and when it struck the earth, it rooted and grew and flowered, 4 blossoms on one stem, a blue, a white, a red, and a yellow, and the rays from these stemmed upward to the heavens, so that all creatures saw it, and in no place was there darkness. Your 6 grandfathers now you shall go back to them, a voice said to me. I had not noticed how I was dressed until now, and I saw that I was painted red all over, and my joints were painted black, and with white stripes between the joints. My bay had lightning stripes all over him, and his mane was a cloud. And when I breathed, my breath was lightning. Now 2 men were leading me, head first like arrows slanting upward, the 2 that brought me from the earth. And as I followed on the bay, they turned into 4 flocks of geese that flew in circles, one above each quarter, sending forth a sacred voice as they flew. I saw ahead the rainbow flaming above the teepee of the 6 grandfathers, built and roofed with cloud, and sewed with thongs of lightning, and underneath it were the wings of the air, and under them the animals and men. And all these were rejoicing, and thunder was like happy laughter. As I rode in through the rainbow door, there was cheering voices from all over the universe, and I saw the 6 grandfathers sitting in a row, with their arms held toward me, their hands palms out. Behind them, in the cloud, were faces without number of all the people yet to be. They cried, the 6 together, making thunder, and as I passed before them there, each gave again the gift that he had given me before, the cup of water, and the bow and arrows, the power to make live, and the power to destroy, the white wing of cleansing, and the healing herb, and the sacred pipe, and the flowering stick. Each one spoke in turn from west to south, explaining what he gave as he had done before, and I felt nearer to the earth. Then the oldest of them said, "Grandson, all over the universe you have seen. Now you shall go back with power to the place from whence you came, and it shall happen yonder that 100 shall be sacred, 100 shall be flames. Behold, I looked below, and I saw my people, and all were well, and they were happy except one, and he was lying like the dead, and that one was myself." Then the oldest grandfather sang. His song went like this: "There is someone lying on earth in a sacred manner. There is someone on earth, he lies. In a sacred manner I have made him to walk. With visible face I am appearing, in a sacred manner I appear. For the greening earth a pleasantness I make. The center of the nation's hoop I have made pleasant. With visible face behold me. The 4-leggeds and the 2-leggeds I have made them to walk. The wingeds of the air I have made them to fly. With visible face I appear, my day I have made it holy." When the singing stopped, I was feeling lost and very lonely. Then a voice above me said, "Look back." It was a spotted eagle that was hovering over me and spoke, and I looked, and where the flaming rainbow teepee, built and roofed with cloud, had been, I saw only the tall rock mountain at the center of the world. I was all alone, on a broad plain, now with my feet upon the earth, alone, but for the spotted eagle guarding me. I could see my people's village far ahead, and I walked very fast, for I was very homesick now. Then I saw my own teepee, and inside I saw my mother and my father bending over a sick boy that was myself. And as I entered the teepee, someone was saying, "The boy is coming too. You had better give him some water." Then I was sitting up, and I was sad, because my mother and my father didn't seem to know that I had been so far away. Now I'm going to take a short break here just to get a little water, and I will continue with this for the next half hour. That was Black Elk's vision, and he's going to continue to talk about what happened when he got back. I'm going to take a short break. And, okay, I just finished reading Black Elk's vision, his sharing that vision with John Neihardt in the 1930s. Powerful experience reading this vision, of course, and so let's find out what happened after he came back into the teepee, and of course it appears that his mother and father and everyone thought he had died. So he says, "When I got back to my father and mother, and I was sitting up there in our teepee, my face was still all puffed and my legs and arms were badly swollen. But I felt good all over and wanted to get right up and run around, and my parents would not let me. They told me I had been sick for 12 days, lying there like dead all the while, and that Whirlwind Chaser, who was Standing Bear's uncle and a medicine man, had brought me back to life. But I knew it was the grandfathers in the Flaming Rainbow teepee who had cured me. But I felt afraid to say so. My father gave Whirlwind Chaser the best horse he had for making me well, and many people came to look at me, and there was much talk about the great power of Whirlwind Chaser, who had made me well all at once when I was almost the same as dead. Everybody was glad that I was living, but as I lay there thinking about the wonderful place where I had been and all that I had seen, I was very sad, for it seemed to me that everybody ought to know about this. But I was afraid to tell, because I knew that nobody would believe me, as little as I was, for I was only 9 years old. Also, as I lay there thinking of my vision, I could see it all again, and I could feel the meaning with a part of me like a strange power glowing in my body. And when the part of me that talks would try to make words for the meaning, it would be like a fog and get away from me. I am sure now that I was then too young to even understand it at all, and that I only felt it. It was the pictures I remembered and the words that went with them, for nothing I have ever seen with my eyes was so clear and bright as what my vision showed me, and no words that I have ever heard with my ears were like the words I heard. I did not have to remember these things. They have remembered themselves all these years. It was as I grew older that the meanings came clearer and clearer out of the pictures and the words, and even now I know that more was shown to me than I can even tell. That evening of the day when I came back, Whirlwind Chaser, who had got a great name and a good horse for curing me, came over to our teepee. He sat down and he looked at me a long time in a strange way. And then he said to my father, "Your boy there is sitting in a sacred manner. I do not know what it is, but there is something special for him to do. For just as I came in, I could see a power like a light all through his body. While he was looking hard at me, I wanted to get up and run away, for I was afraid he might look right into me and see my vision there and tell it wrong. And then maybe all the people would think that I was crazy. For a long while after that, whenever I saw Whirlwind Chaser coming, I would run away and I'd hide, for fear that he might see into me and tell the vision. The next morning, All the swelling had left my face and my legs and my arms, and I felt well as ever. But everything around me seemed strange, as though it were far away. I remember that for 12 days after that I wanted to be alone, and it seemed I did not belong to my people. They were almost like strangers. I would be out alone away from the village and the other boys. I would look around to the four quarters thinking of my vision and wishing I could get back there again. I would go home to eat, but I could not make myself eat much. And my father and mother thought that I was sick yet, but I was not. I was only homesick for the place where I had been. I could not tell what I had seen and heard. Even to my mother's father refused to go, although before that I used to think that I could tell him anything, for he liked everything a boy could like, and there was no end to the wonderful things he would tell. It was he who made the first bow I ever had, and he always had more arrows ready for me when I had lost all those that he had given me. I loved my father, but refused to go was different, and I used to be with him a great deal. This was the first thing I could not tell him. One day during this time I was out with the bow and arrows my grandfather had made for me, and as I walked along thinking of my vision, suddenly I felt very strange. And for a little while it seemed that the bow and the arrows were those that the first grandfather in the flaming rainbow teepee had given me. Then they were only those that Refused to Go had made, and I felt foolish, and I tried to make myself think it was all only a dream anyway. So I thought I would forget about it, and then I would shoot something. There was a bush and a little bird sitting in it, but just as I was going to shoot, I felt that strange feeling again, and remembered that I was to be like a relative with the birds, so I did not shoot. Then I went on down toward a creek, feeling foolish because I had let the little bird go, and when I saw a green frog sitting there, I just shot him right away. But when I picked him up by the legs, I thought, now I have killed him. It made me want to cry. And now Standing Bear speaks. I remember the time when my friend here was sick. I was 4 years old than he was. I am Minikanju, but our mothers were cousins, and we used to play together when our bands were camping in one place. It was at the headwaters of the Greasy Grass and the Little Bighorn. Everybody in the village was there, so was Black Elk. The next thing I heard was that he was dying, just breathing a little. Everybody was excited over it. They sent for medicine to other bands, but nobody knew what the sickness was. I saw him during this time. He looked dead. Everybody was talking. Then he was well all at once, and everybody wondered and talked about it. I remember too how it was after he got up. Right after that we moved camp to the mouth of Willow Creek, south about 2 days, and while the village was moving, I rode back to where the smaller boys were in the rear, for I wanted to see my young friend. I said to him, "How, younger brother, you got well after all?" And he said, yes, I'm not sick at all now." But as we rode along together and talked, he was not like a boy. He was more like an old man. I can remember his father talking to my father in our teepee while we were eating one evening. He said something like this: "Since my boy was sick, he is not the same boy. He has strange ways, and he does not like to be at home. I feel sorry about the way he is." Then we went on a big hunt, and the people did not talk about it anymore. And now Black Elk continues. Yes, we went on a big hunt after we had been at Willow Creek a while, and it helped me to quit thinking about my vision all the time. One morning the crier came around the circle of the village calling out that we were going to break camp. The advisors were in the council teepee, and he cried to them, "The advisors, come forth to the center. Bring your fires along." It was their duty to save fire for the people because we had no matches then. "Now take it down, down," the crier shouted, and all the people began taking down their teepees and packing them on pony drags. Then the crier said, "Many bison, I have heard, many bison, I have heard. Your children, you must take care of them." He meant to keep the children close while traveling so that they would not scare the bison. Then we broke camp and we started in formation. The 4 advisors first, a crier behind them, the chiefs next, and then the people with the loaded pony drags in a long line, and the herd of ponies following. I was riding near the rear and some of the smaller boys, and when the people were going up a long hill, I looked ahead, and it made me feel strange again for a little while, because I remembered the nation walking in a sacred manner on the red road in my vision. But this was different, and then I forgot again, for something exciting was going to happen, and even the ponies seemed to know. After we had been traveling a while, we came to a place where there were many turnips growing, and the crier said, "Take off your loads and let your horses rest. Take your sticks and dig turnips for yourselves." And while the people were doing this, the advisors sat on a hill nearby and they smoked. Then the crier shouted, "Put up your loads!" And soon the village was moving again. When the sun was high, the advisors found a place to camp where there was wood and also water. And while the women were cooking all around the circle, I heard people saying that the scouts were returning. And over the top of a hill I saw 3 horsebacks coming. They rode to the council teepee in the middle of the village. And all the people were going there to hear. I went there too. I got up close, so that I could look in between the legs of the men. The crier came out of the council teepee and said, speaking to the people for the scouts, "I have protected you. In return you shall give me many gifts." And the scouts then sat down before the door of the teepee, and one of the advisors filled the sacred pipe with the chinchasha, the red willow, and they set it on a bison chip in front of him, because the bison was sacred to us and gave us both food and shelter. Then he lit the pipe. He offered it to the 4 quarters, to the spirit above and to the mother below, and passed it to the scouts. He said, "The nation has depended upon you. Whatever you have seen, maybe it is for the good of the people." And the scouts smoked, meaning that they would tell the truth. And then the advisor said, "At what place have you stood and seen the good? Report it to me, and I will be glad." And one of the scouts answered, "You know where we started from. We went and reached the top of a hill, and there we saw a small herd of bison," and he pointed as he spoke. The advisor said, "Maybe on the other side of that you have seen the good. Report it." And the scout answered, "On the other side of that we saw a second and larger herd of bison." And then the advisor said, "I shall be thankful to you. Tell me all that you have seen out there." The scout replied, On the other side of that there was nothing but bison all over the country. And the advisor said, "Hechetuelo." Then the crier shouted like a singing, "Your knives shall be sharpened, your arrows shall be sharpened. Make ready, make haste. Your horses make ready. We shall go forth with arrows. Plenty of meat we shall make." And everybody began sharpening their knives and their arrows. They were getting the best horses ready for the great making of meat. We started for where the bison were. The soldier band went first, riding 20 abreast, and anybody who dared go ahead of them would get knocked off his horse. They kept order, and everybody had to obey. After them came the hunters, riding 5 abreast. The people came up in the rear. Then the headman of the advisors went around picking out the best hunters with the fastest horses. And to those he said, "Good young warriors, my relatives, your work I know is good. What you do is good always, so today you shall feed the helpless. Perhaps there are some old and feeble people without sons, or some who have little children and no man. You shall help them, and whatever you kill shall be theirs." This was a great honor for young men. Then, when we had come near to where the bison were, the hunters circled around them, and the cry went up as in a battle, "Hokahey!" which meant to get ready and charge. Then there was a great dust. Everybody shouted, and all the hunters went in to kill, every man for himself. They were all nearly naked, with their quivers full of arrows hanging on their left sides, and they would ride right up to a bison and shoot him behind the left shoulder. Some of the arrows would go in up to the feathers, and sometimes those that struck no bones went right straight through. Everybody was very happy. And now Standing Bear speaks. "I remember that hunt, for before that time I had only killed a calf. I was 13 years old and supposed to be a man, so I made up my mind I'd get a yearling. One of them went down a draw, and I raced after him on my pony. My first shot did not seem to hurt him at all, but my pony kept right after him, and the second arrow went in halfway. I think I hit his heart, for he began to wobble as he ran, and the blood came out of his nose. Once the hunters cried, "Yo, yoo-ha!" I can't do it. Yoo-hoo! Anyway, they were so excited, of course. It was a very significant because now they would have food for the winter. They were crying out with joy. And of course Standing Bear continues, and he says, "This was my first big bison, and I just kept on yelling. People must have thought I was killing a whole herd the way I yelled. And when he went down, I got off my horse and I began butchering him myself. I was very happy. All over the land, as far as I could see, there were men butchering bison now, and the women and the old men who could not hunt were coming up to help. All the women were making the tremolo of joy for what the warriors had given them. That was in the moon of red cherries, July, and it was a great killing." And now Black Elk continues. "I was well enough to go along on my pony, but I was not old enough to hunt. So we little boys scouted around and we watched the hunters, and when we would see a bunch of bison coming, we would yell, 'Yoo!' like the others, but nobody noticed us. When the butchering was all over, they hung the meat across the horses' backs, and they fastened it with strips of fresh bison hide. On the way back to the village, all the hunting horses were loaded with meat, and we little boys, who could not wait for the feast, helped ourselves to all the raw liver we wanted. Nobody got cross when we did this. During this time, women back at camp were cutting long poles and forked sticks to make drying racks for the meat. When the hunters got home, they threw their meat in piles on the leaves of trees. Then the advisors all went back into the council teepee, and from all directions the people came, bringing gifts of meat to them, and the advisors all cried, after which they sang for those who had brought them the good gifts. And when they had eaten all they could, the crier shouted to the people, "All come home. It is more than I can eat." And people from all over the camp came to get a little of the meat that was left over. The women were all busy cutting the meat into strips and hanging on the racks to dry. You could see red meat hanging everywhere. The people feasted all night long, and they danced and they sang. Those were happy times. There was a war game that we little boys played after a big hunt. We went out a little way from the village and we built some grass teepees, playing we were enemies and this was our village. We had our own advisor, and when it got dark he would order us to go and steal some dried meat from the big people. He would hold a stick up to us and we had to bite off a piece of it. If we bit a big piece, we had to get a big piece of meat, and if we bit a little piece, we did not have to get so much. Then we started for the big people's village, crawling on our bellies, and when we got back without getting caught, we would have a big feast and we would dance and we would make kill talks, telling of our brave deeds like warriors. I remember once I had no brave deed to tell. I crawled up to a leaning tree beside a teepee, and there was meat hanging on the limbs. I wanted a tongue I saw up there in the moonlight, so I climbed up. But just as I was about to reach it, the man in the teepee yelled, "Yeah!" He was saying this to his dog, who was stealing some meat too. But I thought the man had seen me, and I was so scared I fell out of the tree. I ran away crying. Then we used to have what we called a chapped breast dance. Our advisor would look us over to see whose breast was burned, most from not having it covered with the whole robe that we wore, and the boy chosen would lead the dance while we all sang like this: "My breast is red, my breast is yellow, I have a chapped breast." We practiced endurance, too. Our advisor would put dry sunflower seeds on our wrists. They were lit at the top. We had to let them burn clear down to the skin. They hurt, they made sores, but if we knocked them off or cried, we would be called women. At the soldiers' town. After all the meat was dried, and the 6 bands of our nation that had come together about the time when the great vision came to me broke camp at the mouth of Willow Creek and scattered to all directions. A small band of our band, the Oglalas, started south for the soldiers' town on Smoky Earth River, for some of our relatives were there and we wanted to see them and we wanted to have a feast. All the rest of the Oglalas stayed in the country with Crazy Horse, who would have nothing to do with the Wasichus. This was late in the moon when the cherries are ripe, July, and we boys had a good time playing. There were not many boys in our small band, and we all played together. I had quit thinking about my vision by then. The strange feelings had left me, and I was not bashful anymore. But whenever a thunderstorm was coming, I felt happy, as though somebody were coming to visit me. We camped first on Powder River, then on the headwaters of the North Fork, the good river where the Cheyenne were there. There is a big butte that we call Sits with the Young One, because it has a little butte beside it. Then we camped on Driftwood Creek, then on the plain of pine trees, and next on Plum Creek. When we got there, the plums were turning red. And so, I'm going to have to end right here. Until next Monday, I want to continue this and see what else about Black Elk shares with John Neihardt in the 1930s. And I want to thank you so much for being here with me today, and send out a blessing to you all. Doksha ki wanchinki antinkulo. I will see you again.